why don't our people just do what we tell them to do? Why do we have to go through all of this, create a healthy culture? Why don't people just do what I tell them to do? I believe that, for leaders, their first flock is their employees. And if the employees are effectively being shepherded, the ministry will grow because more people will be effectively doing the work of the ministry.
Al Lopus is the co-founder and current board chair at Best Christian Workplaces. For over 20 years, BCW has conducted some of the broadest ever employee opinion surveys of Christian workers. Al is a recognized author, speaker, and consultant helping Christian leaders and organizations flourish. ECFA President Michael Martin sits down with Al and talks about how leadership integrity is a foundation to a flourishing culture, how the results of the surveys over the years point to leaders caring, serving, shepherding their employees. Stick around, you won't want to miss out on these insights.
I find flourishing as a workplace where employees are fully engaged, working with passion. They feel a profound connection to their mission. They drive innovation. They move the organization forward. I mean, that's when things are really flourishing.
Well, it is my privilege today to get to welcome to the podcast Al Lopus, the founder and current board chair of Best Christian Workplaces, author of The Road to Flourishing. There's many things I could go on to say about Al, but I think also importantly, really a friend and a partner in ministry, shares so much of the heartbeat of ECFA. Al, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Michael, and what a pleasure it is to be with you. This is really a pleasure. I look forward to our conversation. And again, I just can't say enough about ECFA and again, as you say, our partnership. I appreciate so much the financial accountability that you help bring Christian workplaces, Christian organizations, and I think of us as sister organizations. As you help bring financial accountability, we help bring people accountability. The kingdom is better as we serve many of the same organizations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I know I'm excited to dive into our conversation about how we've been having a series of conversations here around healthy leadership and the importance of that in terms of ECFA's mission of enhancing trust, but also, Al, I so look forward to the insights that you'll bring from the standpoint of Best Christian Workplaces and how healthy leadership is really critical to a flourishing culture. But before we get there, hey, I got to take the opportunity to congratulate you too on Best Christian Workplaces and your ECFA accreditation. We're so proud of that milestone for you.
Well, it was really time for us. And so, we went through the process. And, I think it's an important step in any Christian nonprofit journey. And it was a great exercise for us. We thought the process was rigorous. It was well done. It was helpful. It was encouraging, and really appreciate that time and effort of your team on our behalf. And we've done some things differently as a result of your suggestions and improved what we do. So, Michael, and to the listeners, I encourage everybody to get accreditation, and it was really helpful for us. And let me also say, I'm going to turn this around and say congratulations again on being a certified in flourishing Best Christian Workplace. I love your mission of financial accountability, and we appreciate so much the work that you do to make ECFA a great workplace as you then serve other ministries and organizations from a financial perspective.
Well, thank you. I was going to have to jump in if you went too far and say, hey, who's hosting the podcast? No, I'm just kidding, but I appreciate that. And that is something we really value, here at ECFA. I think it's appropriate. I mean, this is the Behind the Seal podcast. We go behind the scenes of ECFA, and that is something that is just even so critical, a high priority for us internally, is making sure that we have a God-honoring, a flourishing team culture for all the reasons, that you all promote at Best Christian Workplaces. And you've been a gift to us. I think of the scripture, Al, of iron sharpening iron. And I think that is what very much our relationship is like between our two organizations, but also those we serve. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, let's jump into, you and I have had a lot of conversations too, sort of off screen, if you will, just around this topic of healthy leadership and how you've seen so much. But I think laying the foundation a little bit, just even in terms of a flourishing culture. You had mentioned that flourishing workplace culture earlier. I guess an initial question for you, Al, is even in Christian ministry, why should we care about having a flourishing workplace culture? Isn't that something that's just secular speak, or is this left to organizations that are not Christian workplaces? Why do we need to even prioritize this?
Yeah, Michael, that's a great question, and burns in my heart, the answer to that question. Recently I heard a couple of middle managers say that their top leader said to them directly, now they wouldn't say it to me, but they said it to their top leader said it to them, why don't our people just do what we tell them to do? Why do we have to go through all of this, create a healthy culture? Why don't people just do what I tell them to do? And I'm convicted by the passage, 1 Peter 5:2, as one of the ones that come back to me, where Peter is telling leaders to shepherd the flock that God's entrusted to them. Yeah. And in another translation, to shepherd the flock under their care. And watching them over and over, not because you must, but because you're willing, eager to serve, not for dishonest gain, not lording it over them, but by being examples of Christian love and care. And, I believe Peter's passing forward the message that he got from Jesus on breakfast, the breakfast on the beach after the resurrection, where Jesus asked him the same question 3 times, do you love me? And what was after Peter said, yes, Lord, I do. Jesus saying, feed my sheep. That was the message to the next and first leader of the church. So I believe that, for leaders, their first flock is their employees. And if the employees are effectively being shepherded, the ministry will grow because more people will be effectively doing the work of the ministry. So, and the other thing is, I've seen, and it just hurts me every time to see a toxic workplace environment, and where people's relationships are broken, where they're literally, at each other's throats. And then I come back to, Jesus said, you'll know that you're my disciples by the way you love one another. And I believe that when a team of employees love one another, it's obvious to others, and they're drawn to it. So they're drawn to the organization. They're drawn to Christ Himself. Those are things that I think leaders should be concerned about and caring about when it comes to having a healthy, even flourishing workplace. And so that's kind of the beginning.
I love it. Well, there's so much you just shared there, a lot of rich commentary, Al, and I appreciate you speaking from the heart. I'm right there with you, and I think this is another way of saying what you just said, right? Which is the organizations we serve. A lot of folks that are listening to this podcast are within Christian ministries and churches. I mean, they really should be the best workplaces out there, isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, we should be trying to reflect creation. And what is creation? It's excellent. God created excellence in creation. And I think we should be excellent financially. We should be excellent in the way we lead people. Absolutely. I think that's a foundational point.
Yeah. I love what you said too, just that passage from 1 Peter, right?
Yeah, 1 Peter 5:2. Yeah.
Yeah, that you shared. Aren't we grateful that Jesus didn't give up on His disciples?
That's right.
That He watched over them willingly. Yeah. I mean, it could have been, grudgingly or giving up, but He was willing to invest, and I think that's a good word for all of us.
Yeah.
Good. Well, hey, let's just unpack too this idea of flourishing. How would you define that, Al? How would you define a flourishing workplace culture? And are there certain things that you've seen, in your experience over the years that are sort of the non-negotiables, if you will?
Yeah, Michael, we would define flourishing as a workplace where employees are fully engaged. they're engaged in their work. They work, with, and the way we define engaged, let me just say that, is that they're working with passion. They feel a profound connection to their mission. They drive innovation. They move the organization forward. I mean, that's when things are really flourishing. We really work with the science of employee engagement, and there is a statistical science underneath engagement. And what we're trying to really, we believe flourishing is when people bring energy to their jobs. They bring enthusiasm, and they bring passion and commitment. And we believe and we do measure these things. So that's the baseline. But and we've surveyed hundreds of thousands of employees in Christian workplaces, and through statistical analysis, we found there are 8 keys to boost employee engagement and well-being. And we've created the acronym Flourish, and the Flourish model as what those 8 keys from fantastic teams to life-giving work to outstanding talent. I mean, we go through each of the 8, and they spell flourish. And as we were understanding this from the statistical outcome of the factors and the way these questions that we ask were grouped together, we thought, well, there needs to be an acronym somewhere, so it will preach. And, and so that's how we came up with Flourish. Now, it wasn't something I created or anybody created. It was the statistical analysis that brought these 8 factors out. But yeah, those are some of the keys. Again, don't we all, as leaders, we want our employees to come to work with energy, enthusiasm, passion, commitment, to bring their whole selves to work, because if they're holding back, then we're not, they're not in a position where they can give their best and to actually experience the joy that we think that Christian workers should experience in serving Christ in their work.
Oh, that's super helpful. That's a great way to remember some of those key elements. You mentioned 8 of them. For those of our listeners, I guess, who are also watching on YouTube, I'm going to hold it up here. This is the road to flourishing.
Yeah,
I make sure I get it in the right place here. Yeah, those 8 keys, and just kind of walk. Oh, there you go, and you've got yours too. So I was ready to proudly show that off, Al. But I think one is it's the I that I wanted to dive into next, right? Which is that's the inspirational leadership, which is one of those keys. And in the book, Al, too, Psalm 78, 72, and I love how this is just all based in God's word and truth. Where it says David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands he led them. And I love how, Al, you talk about the importance to kind of take away from that it's both character and competence that are the underlying ingredients to inspirational leadership. Can you tell us a little bit more insights in that area?
Yeah, Michael, I love this verse, and I appreciate you calling that out. Integrity of heart, skillful hands, 2 key criteria for selecting great people and having great people on your team to accomplish the work that your organization's been called to do. And many times people will say, oh, I'm willing to sacrifice the character piece just to get somebody in the job that's competent. We need to get this job done, and gosh, we're having a hard time finding somebody, and the job needs to get done, and there's a lot of pressure to do that, and so we'll sacrifice on the character. We might not even check references, which is just a huge problem. And I'll say that's a huge mistake, hiring somebody for competence without character, because leaders in Christian workplaces understand we can teach skills. We can teach competence, but it's really hard to see a person's character change. And also, so I'll just say character comes first. Hire, select, and retain based on character. And so we also, I'll just say, so there's character, there's competence, but also chemistry, and the way a person fits in the culture is important. So those are 3 keys: character, competence, and chemistry. But as I look at your question again of inspirational leadership, so we ask several questions on, and I often will say Christian character. So leaders need to not only have high levels of trust, which comes through through integrity. So we've got integrity, and then we also want leaders who exhibit the characters of Christ with integrity, and compassion is another one of the things that we survey and look for in inspirational leadership. So leaders. Another question that we oftentimes will ask in Christian organizations: leaders put the organization first, not themselves, as well in the work that they do. So, inspirational leadership. And another thing, of the 8 factors, we've done a statistical analysis on the relative weights. Of these 8, how important is inspirational leadership versus rewarding compensation? Well, inspirational leadership almost in every sector is the number one most important thing to creating engaged employees in a flourishing workplace. So character, competence, really key and a part of the 8 factors.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I mean, we hear it said all the time that tone that's set by leadership, I mean, so critical, right, in terms of what happens throughout the organization.
Yeah, and there's also practices, again, and I think it's all about shepherding. So I think about shepherding a flock, and when you're shepherding a flock, you have to be paying attention to the sheep. And, transitioning now from actually shepherding a sheep to actually shepherding people, I believe that a key aspect is, how do you know if those that you're shepherding are in good health or not? Well, asking them how they can be even more effective, asking them how their experience is, asking them actually how the organization can improve. So actually, that healthy communication is kind of goes along with inspirational leadership, where people feel like they're being heard, that you're seeking their suggestions, you're acting on those suggestions. That's really also a key part of creating a flourishing workplace. So, Christian character, healthy communication, those are 2 really important keys to create a healthy workplace.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's a little bit of a digression, but I think you'll forgive me because we've had some of these conversations too. So Al, you were just talking about the importance of the leader acting as shepherd, over the organization. And that is, it's being watchful, it's providing care, being, what are the practical supports, that can be provided. What would you say too, in terms of the board's relationship with the leader in terms of helping shepherd? Because in a sense, I mean, there needs to be that same type of, or maybe not exactly the same, but a similar type of support that the leader is experiencing as well and being shepherded.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very interesting question. Yeah. So how does that work from a board's perspective? And one of the things we find in our work is that people have higher levels of engagement when they know exactly what their job responsibilities are. And so I like the idea of a board as able to support the CEO or the executive director by being clear on their responsibilities. That way they can support them, love them truly, and be clear about what the responsibilities are. So having a good board policy manual. I like several organizations will say, okay, so we want to know that there's a healthy workplace environment, and we'd like you to actually survey your employees and know that you're actually listening to feedback and getting feedback and caring for your team. So the board has got to, in my mind, be very supportive, caring, and clear on what responsibilities are, and then support them in that process.
No, that's exactly right. And then kind of taking us back to where I think you were leaving off to, just on that point about competence and character.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know what it says about the sort of the human condition, but it seems like we're always looking at, I mean, competence is just what people seem to be drawn to, excited about, talk about. How would you coach organizations along in terms of how can we be better about prioritizing the importance of character as well?
Yeah, how do we prioritize character? Well, first of all, I think for organizations, and as they define who they're hiring and what the things, what you're looking for in the hiring process, is to make sure that character is in the mix. And oftentimes, as organizations are interviewing candidates, they'll have different people who actually are asking different kinds of questions. So they're not, of course, many organizations will have many people interview a candidate, and without much direction, all the people are interviewing using the same questions. Well, you don't learn as much as if you're beginning to have some people really hone in on character questions, and others on competence questions, and others on chemistry questions, for example. So again, having good processes in place, where you're asking employees behaviorally oriented questions about, well, in the past, when you came into this kind of a situation, how did you handle it? And then you define character kinds of issues. If you found that, somebody was cheating in one way or another, how did you handle that? Or when you personally found yourself in this kind of a situation or that, how did you handle it? So getting at some of the character questions in interviewing processes is important. But then having, I'll say another key aspect around defining the culture of an organization, which includes character, is having clear employee values. How are we going to treat one another? And, how do we all agree that this is the culture that we want based on these values? Excellence might be a value, and it's defined in a lot of different ways for a lot of different organizations. But again, defining what that means, relationships, that's a Best Christian Workplace value, where we honor relationships. And when people lie and cheat or take shortcuts, that's not honoring relationships, and trust is broken, which kind of gets to part of maybe our future discussion here, and such a key important aspect from a financial standpoint. So those, really focusing on bringing in people of high character, setting up a culture where high character is kind of expected, and that you want employees to all be helping each other to maintain high levels of excellence and really high levels of character.
That's brilliant. And I think anybody who's listening, who really took time to absorb what you just said, which is setting a high bar, especially right on the front end, paying more focus on character than necessarily competence, knowing some of those things can be trained. I mean, Al, you just saved folks hundreds of hours in terms of their time, probably thousands of dollars in terms of, potential misses in terms of hiring and so forth. So anyway, that is some great wisdom that you just shared.
It's also one of the questions that we ask under Fantastic Teams, because again, when we're on a team and we encourage excellence on our teams, we're going to see people perform with higher levels of performance, but also maintain high levels of character in the process. So I think there's a real tie between excellence and character in the workplace and within teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'd love to kind of take a turn here too in our conversations. And again, this is the Behind the Seal podcast. We're going behind the scenes of Al Lopus here, and I'm not going to ask you to name any names or anything like that, but you do have the benefit of just in all your work through Best Christian Workplaces. I'm sure you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. Hopefully when ECFA, we took your assessment, we weren't the bad and the ugly, no. But you've seen it out there and in your work with different organizations. So I'm curious specifically around this area of healthy leadership and leadership integrity. What implications have you seen especially on that issue for maybe even some of those bad or the ugly examples when leadership integrity is lacking? What is the impact?
When I first started the Best Christian Workplaces, and we asked the question of Christian workplaces, there's a high level of trust between between leaders and employees. That's one of our questions, and you answer on a disagree to strongly agree basis. And that question got lower scores amongst Christian organizations than secular ones. So
wow.
In Christian organizations, there was less trust between employees and the leadership than in secular organizations. And it's like, of course, the next question is, well, why is that? It shouldn't be that way. I mean, none of us would say that it should be that way. And it gets down to integrity from my perspective. Of course, I believe that employees in Christian workplaces have higher expectations of their leaders than they might, especially around behavior, than they would see in a secular workplace. I mean, I worked before starting Best Christian Workplaces in the secular workplace for, probably 30 years and at least 25. And I always kind of knew that I'd have some good ones, I'd have some bad ones, and I didn't have always high expectations for Christ-like behavior in my leaders in the secular workplace. But then it comes down to integrity, Michael, is and trust, and of course the two go together. Integrity, I think of as people saying one thing and doing another, and that's the hard part in Christian leadership. Is we'll say one thing, that's true in leadership altogether, but we'll say one thing and then we'll do another. We'll ask people to do something that we wouldn't even be willing to do ourselves, and that's where trust is broken. And when trust is broken between leaders and staff, it really just puts a damper on the impact of the organization. It puts a damper on the feeling in the office, and it can really go downhill pretty fast. And if there isn't accountability in the process, and nobody, the board doesn't know, leaders just get used to, well, that's so and so, and he or she is just that way, and there's no changing it, and things continue to just step down, and you get into that negative cycle. That's gets to be pretty depressing and toxic, even from our perspective. So, trust, integrity, doing one thing, saying one thing and doing another is at the core. And again, accountability is where it should stop, but oftentimes that's the weak link.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's right. I think a lot of what you described, Al, is sort of a ripple effect or like a domino effect where you've got, again, the integrity of the leader and the health of the leader. And then if that's a miss, well, then that kind of, takes a hit on the organization, the workplace culture. And then I think of the ultimate end, Al, and that is organizations and their mission effectiveness. Right. That's sort of the furthest layer out of it. Really compromises the ability of these organizations to help faithfully carry out their missions.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of if there's a healthy and flourishing workplace culture where people are, where there's high levels of trust, where there's high levels of integrity, there's inspirational leadership, there's healthy communication, there's outstanding talent. We're going to see an organization that has people that are highly capable the work they're doing, and they stick around long enough to become highly capable. So that's a retention factor. And when that's the case, then they're able to actually achieve the work that the organization is set out to achieve. And so, I think of in many cases, it's a customer. So the customer experiences the work, or a congregate, or whoever it is that's receiving the work of the organization. They have a great experience. They become satisfied, and then over time loyal. That's also true with donors. Donors will see the work that's being done, and they become really satisfied with the work that's being done. They become loyal over time. And when you've got more and more loyal donors, more and more loyal receivers of the work that the organization does, then you see growth and effectiveness and impact over time. So there's a real value chain that we see between flourishing workplaces and the work that an organization does, and it's because of the way that they're working together. And it's when people work together, it's a psalm: when people work together, God blesses their work. That's yeah.
Good. No, that's exactly right too. And I wonder, Al, if you can think of, and again, without naming any names or anything like that, but I'm sure you've probably been brought into situations before in an organization where, let's say, unfortunately, they're just coming on the heels of some kind of an integrity, a failure or a fall of a leader, and you've seen maybe a certain survey result within the best Christian workplaces, or you get an initial baseline of where the culture's at. Can you talk about just what you've seen in terms of when the integrity and leadership is restored over time? What does it look like for that culture to be able to be built back up? Is there an example or some general principles that you can speak to?
Yeah, I think, So, I've been doing this for 20 years, Michael. So, there have been some key places where we've seen an organization, where a leader has fallen. And we've seen situations where they've hardly ever recovered. And that's disappointing and hurtful, but many cases, we're able to see that, there's a fresh start. They put in the foundations, of culture. They begin to build trust over time. Again, that's a key point. There's a book about trust, and even if there isn't a moral failure, but just a leader isn't able to lead over time, how do they turn something around? And they can, put and begin to work together with a team with a clear plan that's clearly communicated, and saying, we're going to do these things, and let's do it together, and we're going to change, maybe even apologize for some past behaviors, and then move forward. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again. So that's encouraging, again, to see, when people begin to follow the 8 keys to a flourishing workplace, and use that as a criteria for an organization moving forward. We see restoration, reconciliation, and we see just a return, if not exceeding ministry impact as a result.
We thank God for His grace, in those situations, for sure. I'd love for you to just sort of draw on these years of experience and maybe envision in your mind, Al. I'm sure there's been some real standout, healthy leaders that you think of that have invited maybe even best Christian workplaces in to do a level of work within the organizations that they've served. As you think on just some of those really healthy leaders that you've come across over the years, are there any, common themes? Are there takeaways that we can all, kind of apply within our own context for supporting healthy leadership? Is there anything that really stands out to you?
there are a number of things, and I've really, I mean, we've worked with 1,500 different Christian organizations. We've run into a lot of great leaders, and my hat's off to them. And they're people that they have inspiration, they have vision. They aren't necessarily charismatic, and that's not our criteria, but they build trust. They have integrity. They have the characteristics of Jesus, as I said before, including compassion. Humility is a big issue, and they're able to organize their team to get the results that the organization hopes to achieve. Again, a way a leader builds trust is he's able to, or she's able to, pull the team together, to have them work together in an effective way to accomplish something, to move a group of people from here to there effectively. And when they're able to do that, that builds trust, and people will align with the direction of the organization. They will, and they'll often bring innovation because of that high level of trust, and because the leader is asking for their input, they're acting on their input, they're engaging people, and as they're able to organize that going forward, they really make a progress, and it proves that they're effective over time. And so when a leader puts others first, the way Jesus describes it, we see positive impact in organizations. How does a leader? One of the things that we see of these leaders is leaders are learners. They really are learning about themselves. They have high levels of self-awareness, and they're continually getting feedback about, okay, so how are people experiencing my leadership, and how can that improve? And so I love Ken Blanchard and Lead Like Jesus says servant leaders, the first thing they do is they ask for feedback, because without feedback, they don't really know if they're accomplishing what they're supposed to be doing. And this is where, I've seen over and over, leaders are resistant to feedback in many cases. They don't really want to know. And when that's the case, then we see them kind of begin to shrivel and lose their effectiveness in leadership. So, healthy leaders are learners. Healthy leaders focus on servant leadership, and servant leaders ask for feedback. That's, and I know, just to use you as an example, Michael, the way you take your employee survey feedback and act on it as individually and as an organization. I've just seen too many leaders, and I'll just say this is the bad example. Too many leaders will take that feedback, they will put it in the bottom shelf, the bottom drawer in their desk, and it won't see the light of day. And you've just hurt the organization more by doing that than anything else, because you've asked for input and you've shelved it, and because you perhaps didn't like the feedback, and there would be a lot of kernels of helpful information that would improve that leader's effectiveness in the process. So again, I just can't say enough how important it is for healthy leaders, servant leaders, to look for feedback and to actually see how their leadership is impacting those that they serve. And that
I sure wish you didn't. I could see how you've experienced that in your work over the years, but I hate to say that, that you have, because that'd be a real miss. It'd be a real miss. And I appreciate too, Al, what you were sharing. Just, I think just around healthy leadership and some of those qualities and servant leadership. I think you hit on really a lot of fundamentals, which, as I'm thinking about, many of the folks who are listening in leadership roles, I think you actually gave a gift too, which is you took some pressure off. Because I think I heard you say, well, you don't have to be charismatic.
Right.
You don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
You don't have to be perfect. And I think that is one of the pressures that leaders often face, is they feel like, well, I've got to have it all together. I've got to be, all things to all people. And what you're saying is it really comes down to some real fundamentals, some basics around character and competence.
Yeah, and self-awareness and emotional intelligence maybe is another term in that. And again, for a leader to say, I don't really know what we should do, but let's work together to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's going to draw people to the leader. It's not going to push them away. I mean, leaders oftentimes have this perspective. I've got to be stoic. I've got to show I've got leadership presence and I know where we're going all the time. Well, that leader is hiding behind a shell, and it will be discovered one way or another, and they'll fall short. But using a good emotional intelligence to understand, if we're, again, in this day, we hear a lot about authentic leaders. And, now I don't know of any leader, and I've known a lot of them, I don't know of any leader that knows exactly what to do in every situation. And to be authentic, just to say, well, I'm not sure exactly what we need to do here, but let's discover that together, and let's move together to move in the right direction once we've discerned it and discover it as a group of believers. And I think those are kinds of characteristics that people are really looking for, and those are the kind of leaders that people will follow.
Amen. Amen to everything you just said. I think you just provided some great coaching there to all of us who are learning from what you've seen and heard. And I wanted to also unpack, kind of pick back up on something else that you said too, which is it is probably a reality in a lot of the work that you would face. And I think this is probably part of human nature and the human condition. But imagine there are some leaders that are out there that would be a little anxious, I guess, about opening themselves up to this kind of candid feedback, constructive feedback from employees, from their team members. Al, what would you say? What would you say to someone who's sort of struggling with that and saying, man, and maybe they even think, if we could do something like the Best Christian Workplaces, I'm sure that would be so valuable, but I'm just a little nervous about it. What would you say?
I don't know about you, Michael. Every time my team has done the Best Christian Workplace surveys, I'm a little nervous about it. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to say? You don't really know until actually you get the feedback. So, every leader out there, I'm going to say, yes, you're going to be a little nervous asking your employees to give feedback on, again, it's a structured questionnaire. These are positively worded questions. We're not inviting, a lot of negativity by any stretch. We're asking about the future and the way people experience the leadership and the culture of the organization. So yeah, first of all, I'd say, you're going to be a little nervous. That's probably a good thing. If you're not, then that might be another story. But secondly, I'd say also for leaders, we've seen a lot of leaders who allow themselves to be hurt by the data. And again, it's data, and people will say some things, and so I'm going to say, leaders, guard your hearts. Nice. There's a lot of scripture. Leaders, people, guard your hearts, but take it as feedback and take it as, people are experiencing it this way, and that's not the way I want to actually have it be so. So, guard your hearts, but then move forward. Recognize, communicate. This is what people are saying, and again, I think it's a leader's, one of their primary jobs is to understand reality and communicate reality to the team of where they are. I've had a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders over the past say, okay, so we're going to communicate the results to our employees, but what we're going to do is we're going to communicate the good results, and we're not going to mention any of the weaknesses.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
And And then they say to themselves, and we're not going to communicate the weaknesses because what would they think? And it's
Yes.
like, well, they already know.
That's what they already think.
They already know. They're the ones that
Yeah.
have given the feedback. So you're just fooling yourself as a leader if you think you can just put a bright light on the current situation and kind of overlook the opportunities for improvement. So yeah, that's those are some of the experiences that we've had. But again, it's when the leaders will say, "This is the truth. Now let's work together to create a better truth. A new reality in an environment." And by communicating, understand, letting your team know you understand where things are, and then together you can move forward. That's what I see over and over and over again. I'm just thinking of a pastor who brought me in. He'd been a long-term pastor. It had some turnover in the church, and probably 70 employees in this organization, and they had a toxic environment, and he could feel it. He didn't understand and know exactly what created it, but he could feel it. And there I was. He asked me to come in and say, "I want you to objectively communicate to all of our staff where we stand." And it was hard. It was hard for me to say it, but he was sitting right there. And then he stood up afterwards. He said, "This humbles me. I'm responsible, and we're going to work together to change that." And and in the next 2 to 3 years, that culture was different. The church was effective. I like to say the health of the church staff today is the health of the congregation tomorrow, or the health of our staff today is the health of our ministry tomorrow. And it was through that humility that leader was able to say, "This is reality. I've had a third party communicate to you what it is. I've heard it, and we're going to change it." And that created momentum and enthusiasm and uh, the strength to move forward.
Love that story. And I'm so glad that you brought out the humility aspect. Humility led to health,
Right.
And then just so many positive benefits that would come. So, Al, that's a great way to I would say, just as we come to our close in our time here, that's a great story. But I do want to give you too just an opportunity to speak to leaders who are listening to, just as you survey the landscape and you're well aware of not just all the victories that we're seeing in the kingdom, but also some of the challenges. Is there a closing thought or a charge that you have for those who are listening, particularly just on this topic about the importance of how healthy leaders can contribute to a healthy, flourishing workplace culture?
Yeah, Michael, a lot of things come to mind, but I'm just thinking on, again, they'll know they're Christians by our love. And, so much in our culture, it's actually the Christians who are being accused of being haters. And so how do we combat that? Well, it's got to be the way we love one another. And the way that starts with the teams that we're working in with our staff. And that will just permeate out and ripples from our staff to those that we work with, our ministries, and the impact of the people in the ministry and the impact that they have on others. It's just going to ripple out that way. So how do we love one another? Well, I'd just say to leaders, understand what it means to be an inspirational leadership or an inspirational leader, and ask for feedback. I guess that would be kind of my bottom line is ask for feedback. Have the emotional maturity to take that feedback, to communicate reality where you are, and then create a plan to move forward. We think of discovery as step one, building as step two, and then flourishing is step 3 as we go through the process of actually creating a flourishing workplace culture.
So good, Al. Well, hey, I appreciate it so much. As always, I've taken a lot away from our time together. I know all those who are listening will do the same. So again, we thank you so much. Thank you for your own inspirational leadership and all that you do through Best Christian Workplaces. It's exciting to see it continue to thrive. And even now we didn't even have time to talk about the recent leadership transition there and kind of the work you're doing even now with mentoring Jay and the rest of the team. But we just continue to cheer you on and appreciate all of your great work and your partnership as well. It means so much.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And again, I appreciate this very much. And thanks for the work that you do at ECFA.
Thank you. Till next time.
I have a question for you. Is your church or organization's culture flourishing? Well, how would you know that if you haven't ever participated in the Best Christian Workplace Institute survey? I encourage you to do that for your staff if you haven't. Here at ECFA, we annually participate in that survey, and it has always been such a blessing for our top leaders to see and hear the pulse of what all the staff thinks and feels about where we're at as an organization. We're thrilled and honestly humbled here at ECFA to have a thriving culture based on the results of the surveys over the years. But it's something that we thought we had, but to actually get the data from all the staff and to confirm what everyone was feeling, what everyone was thinking, it just makes the bond of our organization even closer. In all honesty, I feel that. We encourage you guys to share this episode, leave a review wherever you get your podcast, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't. Thanks so much for listening. Have a good week.